Welcome. You're listening to How I Did That, a storytelling podcast. Let's jump into today's episode.
What's up? Thank you for joining.
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. Since we last talked, which was when?
Like 2-3 weeks ago, maybe?
No, I think this was like 2 months ago.
Oh, really? Oh my god, literally time, I just don't know any time anymore.
I just checked the timestamps on this. Okay, we talked at the end of July.
Oh my god, literally it's been a month.
Like 6 weeks, 5 weeks. Thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
My name's Amrita. I'm a lawyer in Toronto, and I've been vegan since 2011.
Cool. So, can you tell us a bit about your vegan journey and how you got into this?
Yeah, totally. So, I started undergrad in 2009, and in second year, when you don't live on res and stuff, I started cooking for myself, and that's when I really got into veganism. So I guess before that, I've been a vegetarian my whole life, because that's how I was raised, and I've tried meat here and there, just if you're out with friends, I'll try it, but I found that contrary to what people say, that it's natural to eat meat, I found that it was very much an acquired taste, one that I didn't have. I didn't like the texture, I didn't really like the flavors, so I never really got into eating meat. And then when I lived on my own in second year, I was just, cognizant of what I was putting into my food, and I researched into the dairy industry, and I found that it's not that different from the meat industry in that how they treat the cows and what they do to the calves after. So that's when I really tried to make a conscious effort to go plant-based, and it didn't happen overnight. The first thing I wanted it to be a lasting transition, so I didn't cut dairy outright. I started with not having cow milk. I started replacing that with alternatives. My favorite is actually soy milk. I really like it. And recently oat milk's become really popular, which is another one of my favorites. So I started cutting out milk. I was never big on cheese, so I cut that out. And then the hardest part for me was definitely just letting go of ice cream. And, when you would go out with friends, it would, a lot of places wouldn't have vegan options. So at those points, I would have, a dairy option. But it wasn't until I moved to Toronto around in 2015 that I really became more strict on myself about, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to seek out places that have vegan options. And luckily for me, Toronto is a very vegan-friendly city, so that wasn't that hard. And since 2015, I'd say that I've, been very good about not consuming any dairy, and I never had meat anyway. Yeah.
Nice. So, living in Toronto, you mentioned that there are a lot of vegan options. Usually, when people transition to being vegan, they don't always have. Sometimes they don't have a supportive environment around them, or their group of friends is usually not 100% vegan. So how did you find it when you were going out and socializing?
That's a great question, and that's something that I struggled with a lot in my undergrad. I didn't want to be a burden to my friend group and, have everyone change plans because there was no meal option for me at a particular place. But when I moved to Toronto, I'd say that my friend group was really supportive, and they were actually very open to trying vegan cuisine. And surprisingly, a lot of the restaurants that I took them to, they really, really liked it. And now a lot of them themselves are transitioning to more plant-based eating for different reasons. I'm definitely a vegan for ethical reasons and just for animal welfare reasons, whereas a lot of my friend circle is transitioning for environmental reasons. But I think the message is definitely getting out there about the benefits of veganism, not just for your health, not just for, the animals, but also for the planet. And I think a lot of people are more receptive. Now, if you go anywhere in Toronto and say you're a vegan, like no one bats an eye. It's just kind of like, yeah, there's a lot of people in this community that live in Toronto. So I'd say I got really lucky in that my friend group was very supportive and open to wanting to try out some vegan cuisine as well.
Okay, that's really good. How did you find, so you said you started going vegan in 2011, right? Like transitioning. I transitioned around 2014. Like I started cutting out a lot of the stuff I was eating because I would eat cheese and yogurt and ice cream like very often. I found that cheese, I think, and ice cream were some of the hardest things for me to cut out. But at that time in 2014, and you can probably attest to this because you were like transitioning 3 years before me, in terms of milk, there was literally only soy milk.
Yeah.
Maybe there was almond milk in the stores. I think there was almond milk, but that was about it. Cashew milk, oat milk, rice milk, none of that
That's
stuff.
all new. Yeah, totally.
All the vegan meats that are now there, they weren't there in the past. Maybe like vegan chicken nuggets, but I think that was about it. Now you have like the whole vegan turkey roast and barbecue.
Meat, everything.
Like bacon and pork or whatever. And then I don't know, like what other things did you notice in the last 10 years in terms of what's now available for vegans, that the resources that were not available in the past?
So I think you hit on a lot, right? Like now there's just so much more variety, whereas before it was just like, if you don't want dairy milk, then you're going to have soy milk. But now there's like, if you go to the vegan milk aisle, there's rice milk, there's like, hemp milk, there's all the other milks that you mentioned. So that has definitely exploded. And now there's just, I think so many brands are opening up to this market, the vegan market. So a lot of brands that make yogurt are now having coconut-based yogurt, ice cream. Ben & Jerry's makes vegan flavors now. So I think in the past, I guess, it has been like 10 years. There's really been a boom of just these brands understanding that this is a emerging market, and they're really catering to them and listening to the consumers, I guess. There's a lot of just plant-based alternatives. So there's, with Beyond Meat, there's plant-based burgers, plant-based hot dogs, everything. I'm not a big plant-based meat person just because, like I said, that taste isn't really my thing. The texture really isn't. So I like more just, if I'm going to have a burger, I'd rather just have a chickpea burger or a black bean burger. That being said, I do actually like the Beyond Meat ones, but some of the other ones I've tried are a little too chewy for me, and it's too reminiscent of a meaty.
I know some people they love that meaty texture, right? So it's like having that meat substitute is like critical for them to be able to transition. But yeah, I never like loved the taste of like the texture of beef or pork or anything either. I did really like fried chicken though. So when they started making like, at least globally local, they had like the vegan fried chicken wings. Those were so good.
And I know KFC now is doing plant-based chicken nuggets as well. But no, I do think it's great that brands are providing meat alternatives, because a lot of my friends that have grown up eating meat, it's a lot easier for them to transition when there's a direct substitute. Whereas, I don't need a direct substitute. I've grown up eating lentils and the like. So, but I think it is great. Where I would want the vegan foods to go is just a variety, right? Like to appeal to people that haven't had meat and prefer the chickpeas or the lentils, but also to people that do like meat and then they want something that's similar in taste and texture.
That's very true that you mentioned. It's a lot easier for people to go vegan when there's a direct substitute. Like I know some people didn't like the taste of soy milk or almond milk. They do have aftertaste. I find that cashew milk doesn't really. It's kind of more neutral. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm allergic to cashews, so that's a lot of, I can't have cashew milk, but then a lot of these vegan cheeses that are like artisan cheeses that some of my vegan friends rave about, I've not been able to have. So, but I've never been a big cheese person, so it's fine. But no, I know that vegan cheeses are a huge thing now.
Well, that's hard because all the vegan cheesecakes I make are made out of cashews.
I've not. There's actually, I guess, a lot of non-nut places like use silken tofu to replace like that cheesecake texture. And I've tried a few and I think they're good, but I've never actually ventured and made one. So
yeah. So with the dairy milks, I was saying that they do have the substitutes, and now they have more substitutes that taste a bit more neutral, that don't give you that aftertaste. So people are like, oh, I don't want to go vegan because I don't have a good milk substitute or a good ice cream substitute. Their ice creams like Haagen-Dazs, Ben & Jerry's, they taste so good. Like some of them cannot tell that it's vegan.
And some of my friends actually like it better. Like it's creamier, like the coconut, like there's a hint of coconut.
You don't feel like bleh after you eat it.
Yeah, exactly. You really don't. Also, oat milk is a great substitute too, because just like when you're trying to put creamers in your coffee and stuff, like I found that a lot of the vegan milks just didn't blend as well, or they weren't thick enough. But oat milk, I found, is the perfect substitute for things to like make it creamy, like in your coffee and stuff. That's really what I use for that substitute.
You know what I noticed with oat milk? I don't know if you noticed this, but when you warm it up, the taste is not the same anymore.
No, it does taste like a little oaty. Like you can taste the oats in it. So yeah, I just put it in a cool coffee, and I really like it.
Yeah, because I noticed with cashew milk, when I warm it up, it's fine. But when I warmed up oat milk in a latte, I was like, this tastes really odd.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But cold oat milk is so good. I actually, when in like 2014-ish, I made homemade oat milk. And this was way before it was like ever in the stores. I just thought of like making it, and I made it with a cheesecloth. So good. I had to use a lot of oats, and I made only 1 cup, but it was so worth it. More recently, I started seeing it in the stores. And there's this one brand of banana ice cream. I forget what it's called, but they started selling it, and I think it's called Pink Fruit, something like that. But they started selling it in the stores, and it's literally like banana base with cocoa powder, or banana base with like strawberries or something, and just raw ice cream. Someone decided to package it and make it a thing. There's a place called I forget what place, but it's in downtown Toronto, and they make, this was such a good place. It was at the Vegan Food Fest when I went a couple years ago, but they make banana-based ice creams, like ice cream sundaes. Yes, they make.
Yeah, they're amazing. I love them. They have popsicles. They have so many different flavors, and like they have a pistachio flavor, and like you can't even taste the banana. They do a great job.
I saw their like all their vegan sundaes, ice cream sundaes, all this stuff, and they look so good.
No, that's one of my favorite places. It's up in North York. I wish they had a downtown location, but whenever I'm up there, I definitely try to.
We need to go to these places together.
Yeah, let me know, and then I will have a little like vegan food crawl.
Yes, that would be so much fun.
We'll definitely go to Globally Local because I haven't been there yet.
Yes,
for vegan baked goods. There's so many in Toronto.
Bloomers, Cosmic Treats shut down. They had a lot of cool desserts.
Yeah, and they had a lot of good ice cream too. That wasn't cashew based, which I really liked.
Right, amazing stuff. Toronto's awesome.
I took my friends to Doomies for my birthday, and they loved it. Like they were like, you could not tell the difference in the texture and taste of the burger. So Doomies is a great one to introduce your non-vegan friends to vegan junk food. But also, I think there's a big misconception in that vegan food is healthy, and then when they have something that's not healthy, they're like, oh, like, vegan food's unhealthy. And it's like, no, like, you can have a healthy lifestyle on meat-based or plant-based, just like you can have an unhealthy plant-based diet or a unhealthy meat-based diet. So I think a lot of people find that vegan food is synonymous with healthy, but it really isn't. Like there's so much vegan junk food that I try to stay away from. But you can have an unhealthy diet on veganism too. So I think people need to be aware that like just switching to plant-based doesn't make it automatically healthy. You still have to put some time and care into making sure that you're getting all your macro and micronutrients.
I wanted to touch on that point actually a bit more, but before that I just wanted to ask you, in Doomies there's that place connected to it within the same area called Not Your Mother, I think. It's like an ice cream place.
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
I haven't. So now Doomies is located in the Vegandale Brewery. And so in that, there's that Not Your Mother ice cream parlor. And then they also have a brewery that just brews like vegan beer and stuff. So before, Doomies used to be its own separate place, but now they've subsumed it all into this big brewery. But I have not tried Not Your Mother.
Okay, because I wanted to try that, and I was just wondering because last time
I've heard good things about it.
I was so full, I wasn't able to have tried.
Also, the desserts at Doomies are so good too.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I had any of the desserts. I did go to Sweet Olenka's.
Oh, I haven't been there.
Okay, that's in downtown Toronto, and that's probably the best vegan ice cream I've had there.
Oh, really? Okay, definitely.
I tried like a salted caramel vegan ice cream, and it like every vegan ice cream tastes a little different. Like some taste more like hard, I guess. They're not as creamy.
Yeah.
Some of them you can have the coconut flavor. Some of them have an almond flavor. This one was like absolutely perfect. It was salted caramel at Sweet Olenka's.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to make a trip there.
But yeah, I wanted to go back to what you said about like healthy and vegan are not synonymous because people always think they are. When you think of the word vegan, what do you think of?
Well, I just think because it's rooted in my own activism, like I think people making a conscious effort to not consume meat. So, that's all it means. For me, it doesn't mean healthy, but for a lot of my other friends, it does. Oh, it just means like, oh, you're only eating plants and like vegetables, so it must be healthy. But I don't think that's correct.
I think a lot of people confuse plant-based and veganism as well, because there's like the plant-based lifestyle where that doesn't mean you're vegan. Maybe it just means you do eat some meat and dairy, but you do focus more on having plants.
Plant-based.
Veganism, though, you can be vegan right for the environment, for the animals. If you're vegan for your health, you will probably most likely be like plant-based and vegan, right?
Yeah.
But if you're vegan for other reasons, some people don't care. They're junk food vegans, right? They'll eat anything that's vegan just because it's vegan, but they don't care about the health aspect. So I think it's important to note that because people think that if they switch to veganism and have that label, they have to be like super healthy.
They'll be healthy. Yeah, no, I agree. You still have to plan out your meals to make sure you're getting everything you need.
Right.
And a lot of you do on a normal like meat-based diet, yeah.
A lot of, I think it's also because a lot of whenever people think of vegan or it's like portrayed in the media, you always see like plants around it. Like, if you see it, I don't know. I can't really think of an example, but anytime you see it portrayed or when people have like the vegan thing in their Instagram bio, it's always a picture of a plant.
Yeah.
It's not synonymous with plant-based, but I don't know how else you would portray it, right? That's the first thing you think of because you're not eating animal products.
Totally.
Yeah. And because a lot of the vegan cafes are more like healthy, like they have acai bowls and all these salads and stuff. Doomies and other vegan junk food places are not always advertised when you think of veganism, right? It's all the raw vegan, like healthy cafes that are. Which I also wanted to ask you, what do you think about the price range, I guess, of vegan food? Because a lot of the vegan cafes, I find that they're super expensive. And I find that that's a deterrent for people wanting to go vegan. But you can also buy like cheap vegan food from the supermarket. Like, does vegan cooking have to be expensive? What do you think?
You're absolutely right. I think when you go out to restaurants or cafes, there is a markup for the vegan label. But once you start cooking on your own, like vegetables are fairly cheap. If you get a bulk of vegetables and then you just have legumes, like it's not expensive to cook on a vegan budget. But going out, because it's still an emerging trend, I think there is a markup. But once you start cooking vegan food on your own, you're going to realize that it's actually a lot cheaper than buying all these expensive meats and stuff. I agree. I think there is a markup when you go out, but once people feel comfortable cooking themselves, they'll realize that it's actually very budget friendly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the reason that some of these cafes mark up their labels is it only because of veganism, or is it also because some of them are like organic foods as well, which does make it more expensive?
I think it might be a mix of both. I think because veganism is synonymous with, in some ways, or in people think it's synonymous with healthy eating, a lot of vegan cafes do go the extra mile to get organic things, non-GMO ingredients. So maybe that's where the markup's coming from. But I also think that because it's like a novel cuisine, people do generally, put a premium on it. I think it's probably a mix of both.
Yeah, I just noticed, like, when I go to some of these cafes, they'll be giving you, like, salad with a smoothie, and it'll be, like, $25, but the salad will have like some pumpkin seeds, some tofu, like
Yeah.
that you can just really easily get and make. And the smoothie would be like banana based smoothies with like cashew milk and stuff, which you're like, I can literally make this at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, honestly, like salads and smoothies like that, once people realize how easy it is to make, like you literally just throw things in a blender or a bowl and like there you have it. So yeah, whenever I go to vegan restaurants, I try not to get like a salad because that you can easily make. But there are like some vegan chefs like Doug McNish that do a really good job of like using creative ingredients to create dishes. And so that stuff does have a markup, but also he's a pretty, well-known chef. He had a restaurant called Mythology. I don't know. Had you been
Did
there?
it shut down?
It is. That was really, really good. And it was just so creative. Like, I normally don't like imitation meats, but he used mushrooms to make calamari, and that was honestly one of the best things I've had. So for things like that, I think there are a markup when you're using like ingredients that aren't easily, available when you're like using, because a lot of the problem with, being in Canada is like you don't get a lot of fresh quantities, right? Like you can grow a lot of roots and stuff, but otherwise like it's hard to get fresh, just seasonal ingredients. So I think maybe the markup comes from like the kinds of food they use and things like that. But yeah, like don't go to a vegan restaurant and order salad because you can easily make it yourself. Unless they have like plant-based feta or something on it. But yeah, if it's just going to be pumpkin seeds and stuff, like people need to realize that you can easily get that and then just make like 100 salads on your own, and it'll be so cheap.
I think part of it is also the reason because the standard American like pyramid, like the standard American diet, like SAD, with the food pyramid, it never really portrayed so many fruits and like it does have like the thing for fruits and vegetables, but people always think you need like this much dairy and this much protein and this many fruits and vegetables on your plate. So when you have a meal of like just a salad and a smoothie, people think it's not a meal. They'll be like, this is not a meal until I have some meat and dairy in it.
Yeah.
Right? I just think that's a big misportrayal, I guess, because nobody ever really teaches you how to cook more with veggies. People think it's just like you need some broccoli on the side and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the staples meat. But recently the Canadian government came out with a revised food guide. And so that severely limited dairy and it didn't have meat as like the main source of protein. Like it really highlighted legumes and other like tofu and other types of beans as a source of protein. So I think they did a really good job of revamping it and kind of bringing it in line with science, because like the amount of meat that like the previous food guide and like the American standard diet has, that's just so bad for your heart health, like your cholesterol, like it's terrible. So it's great that, finally the government's catching up to what science has been saying for so long.
Yeah, it's very true. And when I watched I think it was What the Health, have you seen that?
I haven't. I'm not big on watching the food documentaries and stuff just because, I mean, I don't know if all of them do, but some of them do show a lot of just like animal cruelty and stuff, and like that stuff I'm really sensitive to, and I honestly try to avoid it. And I think if you're a vegan, then you already know all of that exists, so I feel like you're not as like bound to watch it, whereas I feel like people that have plant-based or have meat-based diets, like they should at least realize how their food is made. And so I think they have a bigger responsibility of watching that and educating themselves on what their choices actually come from, But yeah, no, going to your point, I have not watched What the Health, but I've heard great things about that one, Forks Over Knives,
Cowspiracy.
Yeah,
Game Changers. I don't remember if it showed a lot of like anything gory or animal cruelty, but I did watch it because from what I remember, it did show a lot of like the science behind what was going on with like why plant-based eating was healthier and the collusion between like the farm, the animal agriculture, and the government. The documentary was explaining when farmers are like advertising for their dairy, the government is like paying for it. So I don't remember exactly what it was, but the government wanted to promote the meat and dairy and then the farmers made more money. There was some like cycle going on there where it benefited both parties.
So the way it works in Canada is that the government buys, like there's a dairy board that the government buys all the milk and then sets the price for it, kind of thing. So it's not like I'm gonna go to this farmer and like get milk directly from them. Like they don't compete for prices, like the government sets it. And so the government also does the marketing and everything for, well, it's not directly the government, it's like in like the dairy board, but it's like.
But they make money off of that then.
Exactly, but it goes back to the farmers, but like it's very heavily regulated. It's not how people say, the market will regulate itself if more people are trying to go plant-based. Like in Canada, that's not the case. Like there's, I think it was last year where they talked about how much just milk is being dumped because people are shifting, but that's not being translated into the market because the government has severely regulated the dairy industry and a lot of the other agriculture industries. So they keep it afloat, like they keep it profitable, but if it were just purely the market, it would not be a profitable venture or as profitable as it is currently, seems to be.
Oh, so you mean usually when there's less demand, the price would drop, but it's not because they're not losing profits because the government is still regulating it?
Yeah, so normally when demand drops, supply also drops, right? Like you're not going to keep pumping like 100, gallons when people are only consuming 50 or something. But because the government buys it and it's not directly the consumer that buys it, it's artificially inflated to seem like there is no drop in dairy consumption, but there in fact is, right? Like I can tell just by talking to my friends, like who actually drinks cow milk. Like literally maybe only like a few of my friends actually.
But all of us grew up drinking cow milk, so there's definitely...
Exactly. There has to be a drop, but I feel like that's not being translated to the farmers because it's all artificially inflated through government regulation.
I see. But if there are not enough people buying the milk, aren't the farmers still losing profit even though the price of the milk stays the same?
No, because the government buys the milk at the same, like the government's
losing money.
The government's losing money. The dairy industry is heavily subsidized by the government, and so are all these other
like meat industry. Eggs.
Yeah, exactly. All these agriculture industries are heavily subsidized by the government, and you can tell how cozy the government is with these agriculture industries. Just recently, I don't know if you've heard about like the ag law that was passed in Ontario. So, like, I'll just do a brief little thing. So, ag laws are laws that have been historically passed in the States to limit the amount of undercover investigations on farms. So, the cruelty isn't exposed and stuff. And they've been ruled unconstitutional in the States because they're limiting freedom of speech in the States, and in Canada, it's freedom of expression. So Alberta was the first province to pass an ag law of their own, which just criminalizes a lot of the vigils. I don't know how much you guys talk about the activism, but a big part of animal advocacy are these vigils where as animals are being sent to the slaughterhouse, right outside the slaughterhouse there's a lot of activists that give them water or just show them love for the first time in their lives before they're going to be killed, and so that's being heavily penalized now through the passing of these laws. And it was this summer, during a pandemic, the Ontario government thinks that this is a priority, to really crack down on animal advocacy and pass this, notwithstanding all the other measures that we need in our province right now, given the state of emergency we're in. They decide that they want to go ahead with this ag law, and so that's been passed, and it's really emboldened the animal or the agriculture industry. I don't know if you've heard that at one of these vigils, one of the activists was run down by a slaughter truck. So, like there's so many ramifications, and it stems back to the government being cozy with these industries and the lobbyists. They're really looking out for those CEOs of all these, agriculture organizations, and not really looking out for our best interest, which is limiting meat intake, going more, having more plants in our diet, and just being aware of where our food comes from.
Did you hear, okay, so this was going back to, I think it was in What the Health, they talk about how the American Heart Association or the Lung Association, and I think this was specifically in America, but I'm sure it translates to North America, Canada, and everywhere else. But those websites listed, like when you go to the websites, it listed like these things that you should do to avoid getting heart disease on the American Heart Association, or lung disease, or like lung issues on the whatever lung association. I don't know. I know there's an AMA, the American. No.
Yeah, I've heard.
American, for at least for the Heart Association, yeah, the person filming the documentary, I guess, he went to these websites, and they are promoting you to eat red meat and other things that are classified as class 1 carcinogens, like asbestos. And then he goes back to these I think he went to the American Heart Association and tried to interview them, or other other like organizations like this, and everyone declined to comment, which was crazy because they're just kind of ignoring what's right under their noses. And it's frustrating to see that half of America, most of America, or most of the people are just kind of asleep, and they just kind of believe what the government's telling them and not really doing their own research. Because do you really think the government has your best interest at heart? I don't think so.
I mean, growing up, I totally thought they would, right? Like, I totally thought if the government says you need X, Y, Z on your plate, they're going to do that to ensure that their citizens are the most healthy they can.
Right.
But, like, as you grow up, as I've, gone to law school, I've realized that that's really not the case, and you really have to look behind a lot of government decisions, a lot of government policies, and really just figure out, what their motivation is. And at least when it comes to animal stuff, their motivation is never, sincere, and it's never really about making sure that the environment, there's no there's so much racial, environmental, I forget the word, environmental racism that happens. It's pretty prolific in the States. I'm sure it's similar in Canada.
What's environmental racism?
So environmental racism is when, and it intersects a lot with animal agriculture, because a lot of the byproducts of animal agriculture, you're raising farms of, cows, of pigs. So all that waste, all their waste has to go somewhere. And so a lot of these factory farms are actually located in areas that are predominantly African American, predominantly people of color, and so that's where a lot of the waste is kept. So much so that to get rid of all this waste, they actually just spray it into the air. That has huge negative effects on not only the health of the people that live there, but also the property values. If you go to rural America and places that are predominantly Black, you'll realize that there's a lot of factory farms there, because it's been systematically set up so that it's just another facet of racism, where you set up things that are harmful for the environment, for the citizens around it, in places where you're gonna find people of color. You're never gonna find a factory farm in a affluent white neighborhood, or near an affluent white neighborhood.
What when you say waste, what is that waste consisting of? Runoff from agricultural farms? Just
you're raising pigs, they're going to poop and, pee, and all of that is contained, and then it's sprayed out on, neighboring fields and stuff, and, obviously the air takes some of it, and then, going back to your point, it is, you think that the government has the best interests of the people, but once you, start digging a little deeper, you realize that that's actually not the case at all.
I was wondering, how did the Canadian government pass that new food pyramid when they really don't have our best interests at heart, and like the government's losing money if they're telling us to eat less animal products.
Yeah.
Why do you think the government passed this? Like, how did it pass?
I don't know. I honestly wish I had researched more into it. I think at this point, it's just kind of common knowledge that red meats are not good for you. And I think they really just needed to update the food guide, because the food guide was so directly opposite of what general knowledge has become. So I think, but from what I've heard, there was a lot of pushback behind doors. Obviously, the dairy industry wasn't happy. The meat industry wasn't happy. So, I mean, that's really bold and great of the government to make that step. But you have to have other policies that are in line with that, right? Like, you're saying you shouldn't consume a lot of dairy. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be using my tax-paying dollars to prop up this industry. It's one step. They could take a lot more, but they're only doing this one step kind of thing.
Going back to your vegan transition, what did you find that like you kind of jumped from being like vegetarian to vegan, like kind of going back and forth? Because for me, initially, it was, at least for a couple years even, sometimes even now, I'll end up like going back and eating like pizza if there's pizza at an event or something. Or I guess more so in the past, it would be a lot harder as soon as I was in a social setting that already had like the non-vegan food there. I mean, I was vegetarian still, but if the food would be there, I'm like, somebody already paid for it. It's already here. It's not going to do anything if I eat it or not. Because I heard that's kind of the ethical vegan thing, where it's like you don't pay for animal products, but if somebody else buys them and they're there, then you just kind of eat them to go with the social setting. I don't know. What do you think about that, and how did you have that struggle as well?
I totally have that struggle, especially when I would come home and the Indian diet, like you have so much yogurt, butter with everything. And at first my parents really weren't on board with like getting vegan butter, getting vegan yogurt for me. So I would come home and I would have, dairy. And I agree. I think for me, it was most important that my dollars didn't go to support it. I can't control what other people do. I can really only control what I do. So for me, the number one thing was I'm not going to buy milk. But obviously, if I'm at home, my mom has bought milk and she's made something with it. Like, I'm not going to be annoying and disrespectful and not eat her food. But as I've gotten older and as I've continued to be a vegan, I think my parents are actually very supportive of it now. And, they have vegan yogurt for me. They have vegan butter at home, vegan milk. And my dad's transitioning to veganism now, too.
Awesome.
I know, I'm really proud of him. It took a long time, but he's finally trying to, make his own plant-based milk. So we have a soy milk maker, but you can make any type of milk with it.
Soybeans, and he literally milks them with a cheesecloth?
No, so it's a machine that does all of that for you. And we got it at TNT. It was really.
Is it like a vegan milk thing with anything, like oats or soybeans or anything?
Yeah. So I mean, it's marketed, because it's from TNT. It's marketed for soy milk, like a soy milk maker. But we've made almond milk. We put a bunch of things. So my dad puts a different blend of milk or a different blend of nuts in it. And so he makes his own milk now, or he's been trying to.
What about rice milk? Does he put rice in it?
He hasn't put rice. He just puts different, he puts pine nuts, cashews, hemp seeds and stuff, and dates. And so he makes it, and it's great because he can customize it himself. But yeah, so now my parents have gotten better about, trying to be more supportive of my veganism, because I've talked to them and they kind of understand where I'm coming from. But before, it was definitely a problem. And even now, if I go to my grandma's house and she's prepared food, and I know that they'll have butter in it, I'm not going to say no to that. Ideally, I would obviously, and my extended family has for a lot of the time, been supportive. They always have an almond milk here or something for me. But I'm not going to ask my grandma to do all of that. So I will, have it just to be respectful. But I think there's also this other prevalent myth, if you're a vegan, oh, you have to be 100% vegan or you're not a vegan. And I think it's really important to debunk that myth, because even small changes are important. So, no one should put down anyone because they claim to be vegan and they accidentally or knowingly ate something that had dairy products in it, because you don't know why they've chosen that. And the fact that 90% of their diet is vegan, that already makes such a difference on the amount of animals killed, on their carbon footprint, food insecurity problems. So I feel like vegans for some reason hold themselves to a standard of perfection, but that really shouldn't be the case. And when you let yourself not be perfect sometimes, I think that motivates other people to be like, okay, well then I'm just going to try and make predominantly plant-based choices, but if I slip up sometimes, that's fine. And when my friends are trying to be vegan, that's what I tell them. I'm like, don't stress. Just because you had, a croissant in the morning doesn't mean your entire day has to be non-vegan. You made one choice that's, not the best, but it doesn't mean that all your other choices have to follow in line. And that's just healthy eating.
You don't need to have an all or nothing mentality, or you
exactly
can't make progress if you only have that mentality, because you'll slip up at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like a lot of non-vegans hold vegans to a standard of perfection. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's really contingent on us to be like, you know what, even 90% makes such a difference. But of course, for me, it is what I buy. So like you said, an ethical vegan, I am trying to vote with my money. And the biggest thing for me is to not buy something that has a milk product or a meat product in it.
Right.
But if it's, a bake sale and I think it's a worthy cause and I know it has, maybe some butter in it, I wouldn't call myself a non-vegan because I've done that.
Right.
And I think it's almost does a disservice to the entire movement if you start, picking up stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I think it definitely would dishearten a lot of people if all that, because the people who are vegan kind of do hold themselves to a higher standard, or other people hold them to a higher standard, because they're like, well, you can't call yourself vegan unless you are only eating
100%. Yeah.
It kind of disheartens people from trying to go vegan, because they're like, oh, I have to do all or nothing. I like what you said about voting with your dollars, because back 10 years ago or 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was transitioning, or you were transitioning, people, I always hear this, it's at least from my family or other people around me, I would hear what difference is it going to make if you're drinking this milk or if you're drinking this milk? It would make a difference to how I feel, but they were thinking on a bigger scale, what difference is it going to make to the world if you're doing this? Nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
But over time, you see how veganism has grown, and it's with each person making that change that the entire consumer demand has shifted, and that really only happens with one person at a time.
Exactly.
If you do it, if I didn't do it, if each person thought like that, there would be no change. We'd be at the same place we were 10 years ago. So I think it's really important that one person can make a change, but it will take that one person, them telling someone else, that person trying it, them telling, kind of word of mouth. That's how it spread. So I think the vegan movement has really grown. It's super cool. I wanted to ask, what does your dad do with the leftover nut pulp from the thing?
Well, so me and my mom have, when he just uses almond milk, we've tried to use that pulp to make almond flour. If you dry it out, you can make almond flour. Right. But right now, I think either he throws it out or he use it in if we're making face scrubs or something. The almond peel, the almond meal is great for exfoliating and stuff.
Oh, because I would think if you just let it dry out and put it in some raw balls or something. My mom makes what is it called? It's like that mix of butter and nut pulp and other little things that you put in it, and it's juran, some kind of juran that you have with your chai. I don't know how to explain it, but she uses nut pulp and sugar and other things.
A pinni?
Yes. Yeah. She makes pinni dough, or she'll put she'll make, or full pinnis, or just the crumbly dough. She'll have dates, almond pulp, and other things in it, and have it with her chai. So I feel my parents really like that deserved. Otherwise, they'll eat like a laddu with their chai, and they're like, they don't really feel good doing that. Definitely before too, though, it was hard trying to have be like, oh, I only want vegan yogurt, I only want like cashew milk. Yeah, because in the beginning, people think it's just a phase. Especially family, you'll be like, it's just a phase, like you'll get over it. But after so many years, they are kind of more on board. My mom started making Indian chai with cashew milk, and she loves it now. She doesn't even have regular milk anymore.
Oh, I love that.
She started using like coconut yogurt because she noticed that her joints were always hurting, and it did make a difference in the way she feels. She doesn't feel bloated. She doesn't feel like I need to go to sleep right after I have chai. I make her like raw vegan balls with dates and nuts and stuff. She has that instead of like a laddu or something with her thing. So yeah, it's definitely cool to see. And because some of my parents have seen more things online or heard more things from me, it's definitely cool to see like them changing now.
Yeah. No,
and being like,
I'm not working on my mom, but my dad's totally on board. And he's being very great about it, but my mom is still hesitant. Like, there's just so many myths that are floating around that she's just like taken as gospel. Like, she's like, oh, where am I going to get my calcium from? It's like, okay, like dairy milk does not have the right kind of calcium for your bone health. Like, it doesn't absorb properly. And like,
and why does America have the highest rates of osteoporosis among the highest dairy consumption?
It just doesn't make sense. But like, she's just like going with these myths. So it's gonna take a lot of just like, you know, sending her articles and having her read it and like, you know, kind of seeing the light. But for her, I think she just is still really stuck in like, oh, dairy is like part of a complete meal, because that's how she's grown up. Like in India, like dairy is a big part of the diet. So I feel like
that's because he still has yogurt, he still has milk, all those things, and I think it's gonna change for him. But for my mom, she has like raw smoothies every morning. We used to do raw juicing, like carrot juice every morning.
I love that.
She has like, she like soaks figs and almonds and stuff to have every morning, because she's like, it's not good to eat them raw, you need to soak them.
Oh my, that's the same.
And like we'll have all these things, and I don't really think she eats much dairy anymore, but I mean, she'll have a pizza slice or something if we order pizza, but for the most part she eats a lot of plant-based. It's definitely helped her. Like, you just know, as you get older, your body just starts to hurt, and so she says it definitely helped her, which is really good.
No, I feel like it's taking out milk for my sister has helped with her acne. Like, there's just so much stuff in milk. And the biggest thing my mom says is like, oh, well, if I'm going to replace milk with plant-based stuff, like if you look at the label, like there's so many additives that I don't really know. And I'm like, I agree. Like, so that's why I'm like, hey, you have now a milk maker that you can make your own little milk with. There's not going to be any of these things. Right. But people don't realize that milk is not pure. Like, there's so much growth hormone. There's so much like it comes
there's
from
a certain level of pus that they allow in.
Exactly. Right. Like, there's so many antibiotics, because these animals are like fed, like they live in confined spaces, like they're fed antibiotics is just part of their normal diet, because otherwise like they would all die of some kind of bacterial infection because they live in such close quarters. And obviously that seeps into their milk, right? Like, so you're not getting pure dairy milk when you're getting milk from the store, right? Like it has all these additives, but because the government's never gonna label what's actually in milk.
I've never looked at the label of milk. I think it's just milk.
It just says milk. But now when you know what comes out of like a cow's udder, like it's not just milk, you know?
Yeah, that does sound kind of gross when you frame it that way. And it is kind of
which is what it is. I find talking about what things are, like meat, that's a euphemism for a corpse of an animal, right? Like all this bacon. Do you mean like the dead skin of a pig? Like, you know, like people have like made all these like new, they're not new, I guess, but there's so much euphemism behind all this cruelty. And one of the things that I try in my activism is to try and just say it what it is. Like, oh, you're eating the corpse of a dead animal. Like, you're eating the corpse of a tortured animal. And I think that really makes people step back and be like, you're not lying. Like, you're not saying the truth, but I just call it something else. And that I found has been really effective, and just, like making people think for a second, and they might still eat whatever they're eating, but hopefully the next time that resonates with them, and that sticks with them.
Yeah, I have a hard time saying that to people because I'm like, oh my god, it's gonna be.
That's gonna come out aggressive.
But as aggressive, and then they'll be like, oh, vegans are so aggressive. But it's true. I mean, I think there's definitely like a way that you can frame it that way and not come off as like aggressive, because it is. I did watch this TED Talk. I think this lady worked in like the meat marketing industry, and she talked about how they specifically package meat with like that happy cow on it, or they don't say exactly where that meat's coming from, right? But they'll make the packaging in such a way that it'll, like, the consumer doesn't even make that connection between like factory farm to the store to their stomach, and they do it on purpose. There was this one Instagrammer, and I think his name is Joey Carbstrong.
Okay.
I don't know if you follow him. I think that's what his handle is, but he actually did an experiment, or maybe it was one of the people from Anonymous, but he did an experiment where he was handing out dog milk to people. And
I've seen that on YouTube.
Right? And they didn't know it was dog milk, or there was one where they knew it was dog milk, and there was a different one where the participants didn't know what they were.
And they told them after, and then they were like disgusted.
Yeah, and he was like, what's the difference? It's still an animal's milk, and they would make it for their children, not for you.
Yeah, so, like, people think cows just make milk. Like,
that's what I used to think. It's like,
it's so weird. It's like, no, like, they make milk because they're mammals, because they're females that have, like, that lactate when they're give birth. So what does that mean? That means that you repeatedly impregnate a female cow so that she produces milk that then you consume. Like, humans are the only mammals in the world that consume another mammal's milk. Like,
and then you take the baby cow away so she doesn't get the milk. The baby doesn't get the milk.
You kill the cow and then you have veal. Like, but like people are like, oh, like meat eating and dairy is natural, and it's like, no, it's like meat eating has been natural because of scarcity. But now when we can create greenhouses and we can make our own food and make nutritious food that has a better environmental impact, it's really not natural. Like, you can subsist on a purely vegan diet. Drinking milk is not natural. Like, no other mammal drinks another mammal's milk, and no other mammal drinks milk after they've like gotten to a certain stage, right? Like, it has intensive growth hormones so that you can get really big in a small amount of time, but like after that, milk, like a mother's milk, is not something you have because it's just not healthy for you.
I don't know why I used to think that cows just randomly produce milk forever and ever. And then I don't know what happens to them after that. But I realize that the meat and dairy industry are linked, because if you're consuming dairy, the way you're getting that dairy means that cow has to go somewhere after, and it goes to the meat industry. It gets killed. So by consuming dairy, you're supporting the meat industry. Yeah. And I always used to think like being vegetarian was better. Like, it is better, but it's still supporting the meat industry. And I thought it had nothing to do with that. Like, I didn't make the connection.
Totally. No, I didn't make that connection until I moved out and was like, okay, so what is actually, like, why am I putting milk in this? And, why is milk okay, but chicken's not? Or, things like that. And so that's when you start researching and you're like, ugh, like, they're actually both not okay.
It's like the law of nature. Like, you're only making the milk for a certain reason, right? For the child. It's not like you have an unlimited thing of resources, because nothing's ever unlimited on Earth. There's always a reason nature does something. Mm-hmm. Nature never just gives you unlimited resources like that, unless you exploit it.
Yeah, like, a cow is not a milk-making machine for humans. Like, that is not what a cow is, but that is what the general society would have you believe.
Aside from, like, what the meat and dairy industry are doing, for your vegan journey, what do you, like, now that you've been vegan for a while, what do you find are the easiest things to cook? What are your go-tos? And what would you recommend for new vegans to start out with?
To make this a lasting lifestyle, I think new vegans need to understand, like, first of all, you need to look at what your body needs. Like, you need to make sure that you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough fat, and once you figure out how much of XYZ you need, you just need to look into, okay, where can I get that from nature? Going back to the calcium thing with my mom, like, kale spinach, like all these green leafy vegetables actually are rich in calcium, but you would never know it, right? You would never know that based on how we consume it and how little, emphasis we put on that. But a lot of these vegetables are a great source of macro and micronutrients. And I think once you do your research, you'll find how to create balanced meals. And so going to your second question, right now, my go-to is just creating bowls. Like I always have some kind of grain. So whether it's, quinoa, rice, or tortilla or something. And then I always have some kind of lentil at home. So generally that's chickpeas because I think they're the most versatile, but kidney beans are great. Because I'm Indian, like I'm familiar with a different type of lentils, so I try to have at least one of those on hand. And then in Toronto, like I subscribe to this organic food basket from Mama Earth, which I highly recommend. They source all their vegetables as much as possible from local farms, so it's a great way to support your local businesses. But then also you get quality produce. So then I get it every week, and so I just try to build like a bowl whenever, like if I'm in a bind, grains, a legume, and then any type of vegetables I can have.
Do you not have to go shopping for produce because you get that weekly box?
Yeah, I don't really shop for produce. Mostly when we go shopping, it's really just for grains. And then you can also get really creative with like the type of sauces you make. So that's really where it comes in. You can obviously get store-bought dressings, but tahini is something that I always have. You can just put some lime juice in it, and it's like a great dressing to put on top of any bowl. I recently made this really yummy peanut sauce, like peanut butter, soy sauce, some garlic chili, like the sriracha, like garlic chili sriracha and lime juice, and like it's delicious. It's 4 ingredients, super easy to whip up. And I think being vegan allows me to try different cuisines because every cuisine has its own different types of vegetables, different type of grains. We recently started buying tostadas a lot, which are just like these hard taco-like shells. They're made from corn, but they're flat. And so you can just put anything on it. And me and my sister put like this chickpea, like vegan tuna mix on it. And that's something that, my friend used to do, and she has a great recipe for that. So it's really easy to mix and match with vegan stuff, right? Like if you know your 3 main macronutrients that you're trying to get, you just put them together. It's just so versatile, right? Like you can have the same thing with rice, you can have the same thing with the tostada. There's just so many combinations you can make. So I think for new vegans, I would just say don't be intimidated, and just like know what your staples are that you always kind of want in the house, and that way it'll be really easy to whip something up even if you don't have like a standard recipe.
Right, that's true. I heard from other people, and I also think this is true myself, that one way is pick what you're already eating and try to find a recipe to veganize it. And then you kind of get more, in that way you don't have to really change what you're eating, and you don't have to be like, oh, I completely need to revamp my whole diet. This is going to take forever. And on top of that, you get introduced to more vegan ingredients when you have to veganize that recipe.
Yeah.
And you maybe for like 1 week you get exposed to a couple new ingredients, and you'll try this new recipe and you veganize it. The next week you focus on something else and introduce a couple new, do research on a couple more different vegan ingredients like nutritional yeast, or like chia seeds, or goji berries, or matcha powder, or just completely different things. Like you want to make a green tea frappuccino, or you can make anything vegan. And I think there's so much experimentation, so many things out there that you don't see in the store because you especially might have to get it online or go find it somewhere else. It might be like hidden in some aisle that you just don't really realize that you can cook with it. I just found there's a lot of versatility, and not even special things. Like if you're not going to like get specialty matcha powder, or goji berries, or cocoa nibs, even just the basics like potatoes, rice, like chickpeas, you can just make so much.
There you go. Yeah,
your regular spices make it so good.
Yeah, and I would also just say like the hardest part is just getting started, right? Like you're not aiming for perfection, like we were talking about. Like try to substitute one ingredient at a time. So like if you're going to do meats, okay, then replace your meats with vegan alternatives. If you're going to say, okay, like I'm comfortable with my meat and having alternatives for that, okay, my next like month or after 2 months, once you're comfortable, okay, I'm going to start replacing all my milk.
Yeah.
And then you kind of do it. Like, if you try to do it all at once, especially if you're a meat eater and someone who's like meat is consistently part of your diet, it's going to be pretty daunting to do 100% change.
Right.
So definitely, like you were saying, like choose 1 or 2 ingredients, but also just choose 1 or 2 meats or dairy products that you'd like to start with your transition. And generally, those are the ones that you don't like that you like the least. So I was like not too tied on dairy milk. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to stop drinking dairy milk and only have plant-based milk. Yeah. And that was such an easy transition for me. For new vegans, I'd say don't be intimidated and don't make it a daunting task when it's not, and to not aim for perfection.
And people think that some vegan food isn't tasty, like mac and cheese might not taste exactly like your version of mac and cheese. People use a nutritional yeast-based mac and cheese because that gives you a cheesy flavor, or people buy vegan cheese from the store and put that in. There's a lot of different ways to veganize a recipe. Like, again, going back to maybe mac and cheese, there's probably like 5 different ways with different bases. You can use a cashew base, you can use like a vegan cheese-based nutritional yeast, or other things, right? So I would say, like, try making that recipe with a couple different highly rated, what am I trying to say? Like, try making one dish with a couple different highly rated recipes with different bases to them to see which one you like best. Because if you make one thing and you don't like it, trust me, like, I've made a lot of different vegan foods that didn't taste good to me, but then I tried it in a different way and it tasted really good. So don't let that dishearten you. I would also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with vegan food is that it's actually a lot more versatile than non-vegan food, right? Like, standard mac and cheese is always cheddar cheese, milk, and macaroni. But like you were saying, vegan mac and cheese is so different. So if you don't like it one way, that doesn't mean you don't like vegan food or you don't like the vegan alternative. It just means you don't like that particular one. But there's so many different recipes. And like you were saying, I definitely make sure I read the reviews and read the ratings. So, because that tells you about, you know, whether or not people have liked it and stuff. And oftentimes in the reviews, people list what substitutions they've made. So a lot of the times if you're allergic to a particular nut, like in the comments, it'll say, oh, you know, my son was allergic to cashews, so I'd actually put potatoes instead. And it tasted just as great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, vegan food, there's not one way to make a vegan dish.
Right.
A particular one.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I definitely am trying to experiment with more coconut milk-based curries because it makes it super thick. It makes everything so good.
But I love all the Thai curries with, like, the coconut milk. Like, I love coconut milk curries.
I love, like, I don't know if you see the Thai Kitchen. It's, like, the red can of coconut milk.
Yeah.
Their coconut milk is really good because a lot of the coconut milks in the back of on the label, you can see what they have in it, and it's not always coconut and water. It's, like, polyphenol 60 and other things, and I'm like, oh, that's why they're all differently priced because they all have, like, random ingredients.
Different things. Yeah.
And so I always put it in the fridge to get the coconut fat to rise to the top.
Yeah.
So good.
I know. I love it. I made icing using coconut milk, but it was like the full fat. Like, and I put it in the fridge to get the milk separated from, like, the cream. Yeah. And it's so good.
Was it really coconutty?
It was super coconut.
It was on, like, a coconut flavored cake or a vanilla?
Yeah, no, it was a coconut flavored cake with, like, chocolate coconut icing. I love cooking vegan stuff because, like, it's just so creative and you just, like, there's no rules. You can do whatever.
So this was not coconut, but you know aquafaba?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very surprised it acts like egg whites.
I know. I haven't used it yet because I'm just like, I don't know. My mom's always told me never to use the liquid in a can. And, like, she's just like that, like, all the tin leaches in and stuff, so I'm always, like, super careful about washing my chickpeas if I ever use canned ones. So I'm, like, not about aquafaba, but everyone uses it now.
I think I heard that somewhere because of course I'm sure, like, the metals, something is, like, leaching into the water. It's not good.
Yeah, that's what my mom says, or that's what she's told me since I've grown up. So I've try to not use canned chickpeas ever, and then if I do, I make sure I rinse them really well.
Yeah, that's good. Also, because a lot of the canned chickpeas have extra ingredients added to them.
Yeah.
Canned beans. So if I get the canned ones, I try to make sure it's like only chickpeas and water. But of course, it's like the metal's not good. But if you soak them at home, I think you can use that water.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna try at some point. But it's, I don't know, I'm just so lazy, so I get canned stuff. But I shouldn't.
You know when everyone was doing like Dalgona whip, Dalgona coffee kind of thing, I made matcha Dalgona. I used aquafaba to whip because usually like coffee and sugar for Dalgona, it whips. I guess coffee. Matcha doesn't whip like that with sugar. So you have to put something else. So I have to put aquafaba. That was the first time I used it, and I had to use the electric beater. I think going and going, and it actually kind of started to whip, which was really cool to see.
Oh, really? Did it have like an underlying like chickpea-ish flavor? Like I just wonder that with aquafaba generally. Like does it have a flavor?
I thought it had a bit of a bitter flavor, yeah.
Oh, really?
Not chickpea flavor, but it was a bit of a bitter flavor.
I definitely want to start getting into aquafaba. I was just unsure. But like when you use aquafaba next, let me know, and like let me know what you think, because I do want to start using it, but I'm just hesitant about the taste, and like I definitely not use the water from the cans. Like I would make my own, like soak my own.
Like next time you soak chickpeas, just take it and just start whipping it. Like don't even heat it, just start whipping it and see what happens.
And see what happens.
If it makes big peaks, because you need an electric whip, like you can't do it by hand, and it takes you forever, and it has to be really, really fast. And so just whip it, and if it starts to form peaks, maybe like try putting sugar in it and make meringues, or just try if it does form peaks, maybe put some matcha or some other flavor in it and try to make some kind of whip and then put it on your coffee. I don't know. See how it turns out. Then you'll know how long it takes you to actually whip matcha.
Yeah.
Because I know people have used it for ice cream bases as well, which is what I tried.
Oh, wow.
Because it's so light and fluffy. You can kind of, or kind of for pavlova, if you've seen pavlova, which is yeah. Which is cool. I do want to make meringues, which is literally just like the sugar and the egg whites, but but apparently that's very hard because the sugar can weigh it down. It has to be very precise.
Oh, wow.
The outside temperature affects everything.
Yeah. Do you watch The Great Canadian Baking Show on Netflix?
No, I don't.
You would love it. I love it. Like it's like, and I'm not even as big of a baker as you are. Like you would really like it because like they make like very like technical bakes and stuff like that. But then also just like very nice looking like showstopper ones.
How is it different than like the Great British Bake Off and all these other?
I think it's all well. It's the same as the Great British Baking Show.
Great British Baking Show, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just the Canadian version. It's hosted by Dan Levy. Like, it's really good.
I made a raw mocha smoothie bowl, like raw coffee smoothie bowl. Then I made an acai bowl.
I love acai bowls. What's the base for your mocha bowl?
Oh, it was like bananas, almond butter, cocoa powder, coffee, cashew milk.
Oh, that looks so good.
I put cocoa nibs and pecans on the top. And then with the acai bowl.
Oh, yum. I love acai bowls. Is that goji berries?
Yes. And you see the wooden coconut spoon?
Yeah.
I tried to order a coconut bowl on Amazon, and it showed the coconut bowl and the spoon, and I didn't realize that you could select either a spoon, either a bowl, or both. I thought I selected the bowl and the spoon, and then just the spoon came in, and I was like, why? Where is the bowl? So I contacted the owner, and it turns out I had only ordered a spoon, but I had paid like $12, so I thought it was bowl and spoon. And then it turns out they gave me a refund, because they're like, oh, you made a mistake, that's fine. And they gave me a refund for $1. Because the spoon and the shipping was $10 from China, and I'm like, I thought it was both things. And my mom was like laughing so much because she's like, you just ordered like a spoon, and I've just been using that spoon with other like bowls.
Oh, you might as well. You paid that much for it.
So I think that was really all I wanted to ask you about, and I really enjoyed hearing your vegan journey and talking about like your perspective on all these different topics. Was there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I really enjoyed sharing my journey with you, and also just like learning about the different restaurants and stuff that you go to, and you know what motivates you to be vegan. So it's been great, and if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can. I'd love to talk more about veganism.
Great. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time.